As lawmakers continue a contentious debate, Texas Senator Ted Cruz is in the capital city to show support for the governor's program. Thank you, Senator Cruz, for taking the time to chat with us.
James, great to be with you.
So you've been a longtime supporter of school vouchers, school choice. Even now that you're in Congress, you're down here in Austin showing your support. Why? Why is the issue so important to you?
Look, I think school choice is the civil rights issue of the 21st century. I think there is no issue more important domestically than ensuring that our kids have a great education. If you look at it, education is the gateway to opportunity, to hope, to the American dream. And school choice is all about giving low-income kids the same choices, the same opportunities that wealthy kids have always had, the ability to choose their school, choose the best school that gives them the best options. This is an issue I've fought for over 30 years. It is a passion of mine, and today the legislature is on the verge of passing what I believe will be the biggest and boldest school choice program in the entire country. That's an exciting day for Texas. That's an exciting day for school kids all across Texas who are going to be empowered to demand and get access to an excellent education.
And a lot of big guns. You're here. The president, I know, has called into the GOP caucus. I want to ask you about one of the concerns that we've heard from opponents of school vouchers is that this would hurt public schools by taking money away from them. How do you respond to that? I mean, it does seem if the money goes with the kids to the private schools, it does go away from the low-income, struggling schools.
Well, you know, that's an argument that the teachers' unions always use against school choice programs. And we now know the argument is wrong. You know, when I first got involved in school choice 30 years ago, there were very few programs that had been implemented. It was an idea, it was a theory. And the number one argument the teachers' unions used against it is this will destroy the public schools. We now know that as a fact, that's wrong. And we know it because there are over 30 jurisdictions across America that have implemented school choice programs. So we can look and see what happens when kids are given choice. When they're given the option, they can stay with their existing school or they can get a scholarship to go to another school. And every place it's implemented, the same thing happens. Number one, the kids who exercise those scholarships, they consistently get better reading scores, better math scores, better graduation rates. Their educational outcomes do better. But we also know what happens to the public schools. The public schools get better. This is one of the most fundamental points now that we see all over the country. School choice improves the public schools. And it's the basic principle of competition. Look, if you've got a terrific public school, if you've got Westlake, where you got a bunch of wealthy families that are going there, if Westlake High School suddenly had a 50% dropout rate, if you had drug dealers walking the hallways, if you had little girls getting sexually assaulted in the bathrooms, if you had among the kids graduating 60, 70, 80% of them not being able to read at grade level, Westlake would be empty. That high school would empty because many of the parents there have the means to either move to another neighborhood with a better public school or to pay tuition at a private school. What school choice is all about doing is giving low-income parents that same ability to say, my kid deserves a great education. And that's true regardless of their race, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their wealth, regardless of their zip code. Every kid in Texas. And so we know now that when those kids have choice, what happens is the public schools that are not doing a good job, that are failing the kids, they consistently get better because if they don't improve, their kids choose to leave. The only way that they can remain and keep the kids choosing to come there is if the kids make the decision, this is the best school for me.
Senator, a quick follow-up there. We had a guest earlier this week from the Panhandle, which is very sparsely spread out. You know, and they were talking about there's not a lot of private school options for them, so it's a bit unfair. Was their characterization for urban people in urban cities to have access to private schools and have that option when they don't have that in places like the Panhandle?
Well, listen, there's a lot of confusion and misunderstanding concerning rural Texas and how school choice impacts rural Texas. It is true that school choice is primarily an option for urban and suburban students because that's where you have a heavy concentration of population. And so that by nature, if you have a large concentration of population, you can have more choices and more options. If it's very sparsely populated, you're not going to see a dozen schools if you don't have enough kids to support a dozen schools. That being said, in rural Texas, we now know in other states that school choice has done nothing to hurt rural education. And even in rural education, you can have options. If kids have scholarship money, that they can get supplemental training, they can get different training. Then giving the kids additional options never hurts the kids. Do you know any kid, look, when you were applying to college, did it hurt you if somebody offered you a scholarship? That's what this is doing to high school kids, is giving them scholarships, the ability to say, hey, you can decide what you care about, what your passions are. And even in rural areas, we see creative programs get stood up to provide options for kids so that they get better choices.
Okay, I want to turn to the federal government now. The big topic on people's mind is the economy. You've been very vocal about President Trump's tariffs. You know, the market has lost trillions of dollars. People have lost a lot of money in their retirement accounts. And there's general level of uncertainty since the tariffs went into effect. How much more pain can the American people take in advancement of these policies? I know you sort of think that if there is a net benefit at the end, but how much pain can the American people take?
Well, listen, I think we're at a decision point for the Trump administration. I think there are two paths they can go. The first path is President Trump can use the incredible leverage that he has on trade, and the tariffs he's announced are very significant. That gives him a lot of leverage. He can use that leverage to negotiate much, much lower tariffs with our trading partners across the globe and do that in exchange for lowering the tariffs he just announced. Yeah. If that happens, that would be a terrific outcome. That outcome would benefit Texas farmers, Texas ranchers, small businesses, manufacturers. Texas does phenomenally well when you open up foreign markets and let us export our goods, our crops, our livestock.
Well,
we do great.
How long should it take?
Well, hold on. Like I said, there are two paths. One is use the leverage to lower tariffs across the globe. The second option, and listen, there are voices within the Trump administration arguing for both of these options. The second option, there are people in this administration that want to see very high tariffs forever as a permanent feature of economic system. High U.S. tariffs, the result of that would be high retaliatory tariffs from our trading partners. I think that would be a terrible outcome. I think that would hurt Texas. It would hurt America. And so what I've been doing, I've been very vocal, urging the president, choose path number one, not path number two. And you know, there is a remarkable opportunity if 30 days, 60 days, 90 days from now, we wake up in a world where tariffs worldwide have dropped dramatically. That would be an extraordinary and an historic economic victory for President Trump. And there would be some irony if Donald J. Trump goes down in history as the greatest free trade president the country has ever seen. That is not what he has espoused in the past, but using tariffs as leverage gives us the possibility to open up those markets. And so I was with President Trump as recently as this weekend. I was with him on Air Force One, went to the UFC fight in Miami, which, by the way, was awesome. Have you ever been to a UFC fight?
I have.
It's spectacular.
It sounds like you want him to move quickly on this.
Yes,
you don't
very
want to
quickly.
be in a tariff war forever.
I have urged him repeatedly, make deals. There are over 130 countries that have come to the White House wanting to make deals. I've said move fast, lower tariffs, expand access. And by the way, I will say, this is something I talk about actually on today's podcast, Verdict with Ted Cruz. I do a little bit of a deep dive that when I was on Air Force One this weekend with him, one of the things we were talking about is all the law firms that have cut settlement deals with the president.
Right, you want him to use that money to work through these 130 trade deals.
Exactly right. He's got $1.5 billion in free legal fees. He was asking me, what should I do with it? I said, look, put them all on negotiating free trade deals to lower these tariffs. That would be a tremendous win for Texas.
Sounds like the issue is how quickly we can work through these. Let's turn to immigration. There's been so much movement on this front, a lot of movement on immigration. You've talked about it. The big story right now is the mistaken deportation of Kilmar Abrego Garcia to El Salvador. Courts have told the administration they need to facilitate his return to the United States. Do you have any concerns about due process in this case?
Well, listen, let's talk about what the facts are. The facts are this individual is an illegal alien. Nobody disputes that he came into this country illegally. Nobody disputes that he has been adjudicated not once but twice by two different courts to be a member of MS-13, a vicious
Senator,
gang.
I think that is disputed.
It is not disputed.
I think it is disputed.
Well, not according to the courts. The courts have adjudicated that.
I think his lawyer disputes that.
But you can't. He can say, I think the courts were wrong, but that doesn't mean you're disputing that the courts adjudicated it. Two courts found that he was a member of MS-13. By the way, He sought asylum and he was denied asylum in the courts. He was denied asylum. He is removable. Now, what the court said...
There's a withholding and removal of him in 2019, though, right?
Okay, but what does it say? Finish reading it.
It's saying he could not be deported to El Salvador because of a fear that he would be targeted by the Barrio 18 gang.
Okay, you're right. They denied him asylum. They said he could be deported. He was deportable. The court order that was initially said...
Not to El Salvador, though.
Yeah, that's exactly where I'm getting. The court order initially said he could be deported to any country on earth except El Salvador. That was the court order. Now, what happened here? He ended up being deported, sent to El Salvador, and the administration says that was a mistake. They didn't see it was an old court order. They were not aware of it, and so they sent him there. It is an astonishing thing. You know, right now there are multiple Democrat senators who are announcing trips to El Salvador, and their mission is to bring back to America this individual. I got to say, it is remarkable that today's Democrat Party, apparently their platform is, what do we need? We need more illegal immigrants in America and more gang members, more members of MS-13. That is unequivocally harmful. You know, in the Oval Office, President Bukele, the president of El Salvador, was there this week, and CNN said, you know, are you going to send him back? By the way, the United States government has designated MS-13 as a terrorist organization because they murder and rape and terrorize people. They are vicious and violent. And when CNN asked President Bukele, are you going to send him back? His answer was, listen, I can't smuggle a terrorist into the United States.
I think that's the big question. I was reading in the Wall Street Journal yesterday that President Trump could be forcing a showdown with the Supreme Court because they've asked the district court to sort of ask the government to facilitate his return for the immigration proceedings. If there is no facilitation there, what does that do for this court fight?
What the Attorney General said...
It's a judiciary versus the executive, right?
Well, no. What the Attorney General said in the Oval Office is that the order was to facilitate the return. That means provide a plane for him to come back if he wants to come back. The Trump administration has offered to do that, and Bukele has said that he's not going to release him. And by the way, this individual is from El Salvador. He's an El Salvadorian national that's being held in an El Salvadorian prison. He has no entitlement to be in the United States. And it's very odd that Democrats are rushing in to say this person who is unquestionably an illegal alien, nobody disputes that he came into this country illegally, and two different courts have adjudicated him an MS-13 gang member, and yet the Democrats are saying what you and your family want is more illegal aliens and gang members living in your neighborhood. I think that's not what the people of Texas or America want.
Well, I don't know what the Democrats want, but I think the question is about due process. We'll have to come back to that one because I want to ask you about the budget fight in Congress. Obviously, the differences between the House and the Senate in terms of how much cuts there will be. The House conservatives have called for trillions, I think, in cuts, and much of that coming from Medicaid. I know some of your colleagues in the Senate are a bit wary of that. Do you think the government should make these kinds of deep cuts to Medicaid, and will that end up happening?
So, number one, to understand when you put things in perspective of cuts, the federal government, particularly under Joe Biden and the Democrats, went on this crazy spending spree. Because of COVID, federal government spending expanded about 40%. It jacked up massively, and it's never gone down. COVID is over, the pandemic is over, and yet the government spending has never gone down. And we are bankrupting our kids and grandkids. What we're doing is immoral. The interest on the debt is now bigger than the entire defense budget, bigger than all the Pentagon, the Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force. All of that is smaller than the interest on the debt. And we're in a hole that keeps getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And so we've got to have leadership to rein back spending. I'm really glad that President Trump is leading with DOGE, working with Elon Musk to rein in waste, fraud, and abuse. Now, when it comes to this bill, the differences between the House and Senate bill right now, I don't think are terribly consequential because this bill is the opening step of a process that's called budget reconciliation. The second step will be the actual reconciliation bill. That's the one that matters. That hadn't been drafted yet. The Senate's going to draft it. The House is going to draft it. That is going to be our vehicle to deliver on our promises to the voters. Now, what does that mean? We're going to use that, number one, to secure the border, to put funding, to build wall, to hire Border Patrol and ICE agents, to use technology, drones, infrared, fixed wing, rotary wing aircraft, all sorts of technology to make sure we secure the border. We're also going to use that to rebuild the military. It is a
Senator,
dangerous
I'm
world.
sorry to cut you off. We have 30 seconds. I just want to ask you, there's been concerns from Senators Collins, Murkowski, even a strong conservative like Josh Hawley about these kinds of cuts. Any concerns from your end about if these
We
cuts
have
happen?
to cut government spending, period, the end, because we're bankrupting our country. And if we don't cut spending now, we're going to have massive cuts forced on us in a few years because the debt hole is getting too deep. And given that we just jacked up spending 40%, I don't know anyone in the private sector who thinks after you've gone on a blowout, stepping back to more reasonable levels is somehow unreasonable. We're going to get the cuts through because we've got to be responsible to the people of Texas.
Thank you so much for coming, Senator.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Let Spectrum News be your resource for balanced, in-depth political coverage. And click the subscribe button here. You can also download our app and watch us on TV to learn more about the candidates, where they stand on the issues, and more. We'll see you then.